Welcome, friends. Today we have class 3 in our study of the Holy Science. And today is a very, very interesting topic. And it's on the subject, as I titled the topic today, I entitled it The Value of Tapasya. And if you remember last week, we left off our discussion on the goal that we're trying to achieve. We're basically trying to achieve divine bliss, yes, but sometimes that translates into avoiding suffering and the pursuit of happiness as a basic theme that was presented by Paramhansa Yogananda in his World Mission. He began it with a lecture on that very topic in Boston in 1920 when he went to America. And I am going to begin by now proceeding to address the topic. We want these avoid suffering, we want to be happy, we want to pursue a goal, but how do we do it? And I think this comes to the core of what yoga is about. Yoga is the solving of the problem that we see, that we're in a land of suffering, the body suffers, like the Buddha noticed that suffering, and he had to discover, what am I going to do about this? And so here it is for each one of us too. We can observe our dilemma, but now at some point we must come to the point where we will act and do something. And I want to begin by reading from the Holy Science. It's going to introduce the topics we're going to be speaking about today. And this is right at the beginning of chapter 3 that's titled The Procedure. In other words, the procedure that we must follow to attain that bliss, that Satchitananda. And the scripture, the sutra is read, and then you could say in his commentary, he summarized it. He says, patience, faith, and holy work explained. Tapas is religious mortification or patience, both in enjoyments and in sufferings. Swadhyaya is shravana, study, with manana, deep attention, and thereby nididhyasana, forming of an idea of true faith about self. That is, what am I? Whence I came? Where I shall go? What have I come for? And other such matters concerning self. Brahmanidana is the baptism or merging of self in the stream of the holy sound, which is the holy work performed to attain salvation, and the only way by which man can return to his divinity, the eternal Father, whence he has fallen. Now that's a mouthful, you might say, and of course somewhat intimidating if we just leave it at that, because then he goes quite quickly onto a summary of perhaps some of the other aspects of what are necessary for us to be able to attain this. But I want to begin by focusing on these 3 qualities that he mentions here: tapas, or tapasya, self-study, swadhyaya, and brahmanidana, the merging of self into the holy stream of Om. Now, I want to begin with a story. And some years ago, I was invited to give a discourse as part of a panel. And I was the first initial speaker in this panel, a discussion. And I don't remember exactly even what the topic of the theme of the topic was. But at the very conclusion of it, I mentioned the word sacrifice. And I said the necessity to sacrifice, and I may have quoted Swami Kriyananda when he said, no great thing in this world, in this life, has ever been accomplished without sacrifice. And it's something to remember. And I said a few words about that, and then took my seat, and the next 2 speakers spoke. And I noticed one of the things that they It was as if I had said something wrong. I had or something that was unpleasant, and they wanted to fill it out a little bit. And that was this word sacrifice. And they went to discuss how sacrifice, that's an old-fashioned term. What we enjoy is what our path is about, joy, and our path. And they began to affirm the positive side of that. Now, I couldn't argue with that, of course, and I didn't argue, and I didn't say anything because it's actually true. And everything they said was true. But what struck me was the reaction. There was as if I said something wrong because I mentioned sacrifice. And it implied to me that these speakers, of course, were not necessarily reacting to that, but they assumed that the audience was not going to understand what I meant when I said sacrifice. And they had to clarify that, and with fervor. And so it reminded me, yes, I think that's perhaps true. They perhaps did the right thing, because oftentimes modern audiences may recoil when the word sacrifice comes up, because there's negative associations and people, I don't want to sacrifice. Is that something people want to do? And I think there is an association with, you might say, the negative side of that. And it reminded me at that time that Swami Kriyananda, he wrote a ceremony called the Festival of Light, which is repeated oftentimes weekly, even in some of our non-dissenters. And there's a line in there that says, "And whereas suffering and sorrow in the past were the coins of man's redemption for us now the payment has been exchanged for calm acceptance and joy. Thus may we understand that pain is the fruit of self-love, whereas joy is the fruit of love for God." And I think that first line of suffering and sorrow in the past, and my fellow speakers were emphasizing that in the past, that you might say was a mode that people felt the necessity of doing, suffering and sorrow. If I do these things, I'm going to be able to find God. And the more I suffer, the more I have sorrow, the more I'll be able to show my worthiness to be ready to receive God's blessings. And that's an old-fashioned way of approaching God. And of course, even today, and we know that there are people that voluntarily take on austerities in order to perhaps, ideally, taking on austerities can be a good thing. It can strengthen us, strengthen our willpower, remind us that we're not this body. But sometimes they take it on just for the wrong purposes, in the sense that if I suffer and I go through this austerity, therefore I'll somehow be more worthy of being able to receive blessings. But you see, that's a bit of an old-fashioned way to look at suffering. And if we tend to discount that as somehow modern society, that's old-fashioned, therefore we don't need to sacrifice. But the fact of the matter is, Swami Kriyananda is quite right. Nothing great is achieved without sacrifice, even spiritual realization. And perhaps I should say especially spiritual realization. But sacrifice and suffering are not necessarily the same thing. And that's where that's where a little misunderstanding, or big misunderstanding, enters into the discussion, that there is a necessity to sacrifice. And when we say that, somebody says, they think of all the things that are going to be taken away, the pain that may come. And unfortunately, in modern society, there is a thought that pain is bad. And we should do everything in our power to avoid pain. And of course, you take it a step down, maybe not pain, because it's very immediate, discomfort, or troubles, or hardship. And I know there are cultures that minimize. It's a bad thing, a negative thing perceived as, to talk about anything that's sad. I'm not going to talk about anything that's sad or that's difficult or trials. And don't you think that in some ways that creates a somewhat of a fantasy land of, oh, it's all pleasant, and it's, and if clouds go, oh. Now, there's an affirmation that to want to seek joy, to life should be pleasant, and we want it to be pleasant, but we don't achieve that pleasantness, we don't achieve happiness, we don't achieve joy by suppressing and pushing under the rug difficulties and challenges and even pain. What we do is we solve the problems of this world. We transcend that pain and that difficulties. We go beyond them because pain and sorrow, pleasure and, false happiness are just counterpoints to that. And to be able to, it's likes and dislikes of the world. And modern society says we have to have as many likes as possible. And if we can satisfy those likes, modern conveniences, the easy way in this, the easy way in that, and unfortunately we perhaps teach our children to take the easy way out of everything. And what's lost in that? What's lost is a certain strength of character, and we give a false notion of what life is really about. And so it's very interesting here. Swami Sri Yukteswar starts his Holy Science chapter on the procedure to be able to attain those inner goals that we're after with the word sacrifice. And tapas, or tapasya, the practice of that, and to be able to endure. And he goes on and describes what that is: pain, yes, but it's the heat and cold, being able to endure the ups and downs, the likes and dislikes, the vagaries, the duality of life, to be able to endure those, but not grimly. You see, grimness is not the answer. It's joyfully. By transcending the ups and downs, we come, in a sense, to a state of grace within ourselves when we go beyond the outward reactive process, which is the very definition of what yoga is: overcoming the reactive process and overcoming the ups and downs, to be centered in ourselves. And I think it was very simply encapsulated by something Paramhansa Yogananda said. He said, even-minded and cheerful. Now, there are people, sadhus and anchorites who go through their or even those who in whatever culture embrace their suffering in order to strengthen themselves. But it's with grimness. If a sad saint is a sad saint indeed, is the way the phrase goes. And if we cannot do it joyfully, we're missing the point. If we cannot do it with an uplifted spirit, we're missing the point. And I would say to face our difficulties in the right spirit is what's going to bring about the transcendence of those. And if you can't do it cheerfully, at least endure gracefully. Because, which is the opposite of complaining. You see, that attitude is you can, in a sense, you've lost the battle right away. To be able to endure gracefully. Practically, yes. I'm speaking ideally here. I realize that. But be practical in your idealism. But that does not mean losing your ideals. It means taking one step at a time, and so at a time where you can perfect those ideals and put your ideals of even-minded and cheerfulness into practice. And this is essential for us as a beginning foundation. And this is Sri Yukteswar starts, to be able to be even-minded and cheerful, or face neutral in the likes and neutralize those likes and dislikes. And even in order to begin the serious quest of finding God, finding that inner joy, ultimately achieving that state of Satchitananda. So he begins that. He says, and so consequently, you could say it's defined, one way to define Tapasya is firmness in staying centered within ourselves, and doing that which resists all of the influences around us that pull us out of ourselves, but doing it in the right spirit. And or you could even say, if you use the word sacrifice, what are we sacrificing? We're sacrificing the lower for the higher. Oh, we give up that lower thing, that lower something, whatever it is, and then we find that very naturally the higher comes in. And when I say giving up, I think maybe a better word might be offering, because to give it up means I'm doing it. But if we say offering, I am including that to which I'm offering into the equation, you see. So if I offer up my little self into that higher self, and we formalize that or ritualize that by offering our little self at the feet of the divine, bringing that divine energy in. And if we approach life in that spirit, then we find that we have prepared ourselves to be able to proceed in the spiritual path. And I think this is what all of us need to realize and come to understand. And I am reminded of Arjuna in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where he's verbalizing to Krishna all the reasons why he doesn't want to fight this battle. And of course, it's the inner battle he's speaking about. And he says, well, if I give up all of these pleasures, if I give up all these likes and dislikes, I will have nothing. When life will become meaningless in a sense. And so what will I have to enjoy in life if I give up the quest for these things? And he doesn't say it in those words, but that's in essence what he's meaning. And if he kills his relatives, kills his cousins, and fights the battle, and Krishna assures him nothing is lost, nothing is ever lost in that battle. And we find that by giving up the little, we gain the higher. And this is what we have to come to understand this through our practice, through our practical experience. You'll see that this is actually true. Now, I want to say that it's not wrong to pursue life without difficulties. It's a fantasy, but it's not necessarily, to have that hope, I can overcome. In other words, to go about life hoping that things will all work out for the best in all times, in all circumstances. We know it's not going to be that way. It's not a bad thing to live a pleasant life. It's not a bad thing to live a pain-free life. These things, or without sorrow. And it's our goal to be able to do that. But the life we live in order to do that is one that is inwardly overcome those attitudes and those false beliefs that somehow that success of overcoming difficulties will be getting everything in our environment perfectly arranged. Everything is just perfect. But as soon as you get something, it's just right, a gust of wind comes and disturbs it, and the next thing you know, you have to start over again. There's a fairy tale of the princess who couldn't get to sleep because she was uncomfortable in her bed, and she kept putting more and more quilt and covers and soft blankets, and she could never get it perfectly comfortable because underneath there was a pea. Somebody had put a little pea pod under there, and she could never overcome that feeling until she got rid of that pea out of the disturbance, or you could say a little rock or pebble that was disturbing her. Well, that's the case with us. We're never going to be so comfortable that we can really enjoy truly until we remove that little rock that's in our bed, which is basically the ego. And so as long as that expectation for the world to conform to us is there, it's an endless pursuit. But if we understand that, then we are motivated. And this is why I think Swami Sri Yukteswar couples Tapasya, right at the beginning, he couples it with swadhyaya. Self-study is because we have to understand, why are we doing this? What's happening? Where am I going? Where have I been? Why do I suffer? How do I... These things that introspect within ourselves, that root in the process, of course, not just to observe it, because it implies the rooting out of all false notions. And so consequently, we have to have that as well, because why do tapasya in the first place? If we don't understand why we're, you could say, trying to be even-minded and cheerful, because we're looking inside. Am I? Am I really even-minded and cheerful? Let's be honest with ourselves. No. Is there ego involved in that? Why did I say that? Why did I do that? And to have that self-reflection, not to chastise ourselves, but simply to be honest, to see that, okay, I'm still in the world of duality, of the world of likes and dislikes. And this, you might say, keeps guardrails in our search, in our desire to meet our goals. And finally, the third thing that is mentioned here at the very beginning of this chapter is Brahmanidana. This is the you could say this is the essence of sadhana, what we're trying to do. It's the merging of the self into the holy stream of Om. This is, you could say this is at the beginning of this chapter, and it implies right from the very beginning what we're trying to do. We're trying to merge ourselves into the holy stream of Om. And of course, it might even say, if we want to read it this way, that this is a basic foundation that for the spiritual path, and that until we actually do that, or until we realize and make a deep attempt to do that, we're a little bit wandering still. And we have to get to that point where we begin to merge ourselves into the Om, because that is, it's been said that that's when the spiritual path, on the deep inner level, you could say the energy within the deep inner level, the inner spine, begins to happen. It's because our awareness, we have to draw ourselves into that inner world, that inner kingdom that the Bible speaks about, that we then are aware of that, and then we can begin to lift that energy consciously. God's grace begins to work within us, and that comes when we begin to immerse ourselves in the sound of Om. This is the Holy Spirit that is spoken of when Jesus Christ appears to his disciples after his crucifixion, his sacrifice, that he comes to the disciples and he blesses all of them, it says in the Bible, with the Holy Spirit. And that's when you could say they understood. And from there, those disciples then went out and shared what was offered to them by Christ, Jesus Christ. And this is where this is our challenge, is to be able to attain that state and to be able to then go inward and begin that inner journey in a very conscious way. So that's a very high standard, and that too takes a certain amount of effort, lots of effort. And he gives us then the tools that are, you might say, the things that we need to do to be able to attain that. And he's going to, which is, I'm not going to go into this week, I'm going to go into these next week, but he gives us 4 particular tools that upon which we can focus. Shraddha, which is the cultivation of the heart's natural love. Virya, which he defines as moral courage. Now I'm using the definitions that Swami Sri Yukteswar uses. You'll notice I may have mentioned this before. It's not necessarily how they're used elsewhere, but this is how he defines them. The third one is Smriti, which of course memory, but he defined it as true conception of our situation in life, and we remember. who and what we really are. And finally, the last two the last one he offers is samadhi. This is now interestingly here. He says samadhi. We need to practice samadhi in order to attain these things. Now we usually think that often the word samadhi is used as a goal. Here he's saying this is a tool that we need to be able to develop. And so you could see he's setting a high goal here for ourselves when samadhi just happens to be a tool that we need to use. And you might think of it as this way: when you're cleaning a laundry, you have to, sometimes one way to clean a dirty shirt is you immerse it in the clean water, and you scrub a little bit, and then you take it out and rinse it out, but it still has residue in it. And so you do it again. You keep, and you get cleaner water, because some of it, the impurities in that shirt, the grime in the shirt has gone into the water. So now you throw that water out, and you do it again, and again, and again. And this is what the Guru says, is we have to learn to be able to attain that state of samadhi. That's not the end. That's the beginning, you might say, of purification. Then we immerse ourselves again and again. But that's the real cleanser, to be able to, because we immerse ourselves in that inner bliss, and that bliss that drives away all that is impure from us. But of course, he's speaking of a high goal here. And so we, I think first, and which are the two I'll focus on next week, we first begin by those first two qualities of Shraddha, the cultivation of the heart's natural love, and the necessity of courage in order to be that. And I think this aspect of courage, coming back to the focus of what we are speaking about today, is the necessity to rid ourselves of those things, the willingness to take up the spiritual path in and of itself is tapasya. Is realizing that I have a battle to fight. And this is Arjuna. He can't avoid that battle. He embraces that battle as a necessity that's necessary. Krishna is there guiding him, but he realizes that is his duty. And I think we, as devotees, we come to that point. This is our duty, and we then have the courage to do what it takes. And so when life itself responds, as in the Battle of Kurukshetra, it is a battle. The negative forces will come out. As soon as you try to make progress in any good endeavor, what are you going to find? You're going to have resistance. There's going to be opposition. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be a certain amount of painfulness. And with all of that, there's going to be suffering that comes with that. And it's because we're in the world of that battle. We're in the world of likes and dislikes. We're in the world of duality, engaging in that battle. To think that pain is bad. Now I know, it's not bad in and of itself. It's an indicator that something's going on here. I need to fix this. And that's where the self-study comes in. Oh, what is it? What is it that's been paining me? What is it? Why do I feel this pain? Why am I suffering? Why are these things happening? But to just simply put them under the rug and think, it's not, we shouldn't talk about those. I shouldn't talk to myself. You probably shouldn't talk to other people about these things so much, because that ends up being complaints. But to ourselves, we say, why? What's going on here? I need to understand this. And not to get so self-involved in it that becomes the focus of your life, but to be honest and clear, and then to act, and to have the courage, which is we'll speak more about next week, to have the courage to actually take that forward action. So this in society, I think, in education, to tone down a little bit, bring down that sense that we have to avoid everything that seems in our own life to be unpleasant, perhaps. Overuse it and take it as a challenge. and say, okay, I'm going to now do something about it. And I'm going to do it cheerfully and gracefully and as my spiritual duty. Whatever my duty is in life, I'm going to embrace it and then overcome it. And then in the overcoming, you'll see, or in the very act of approaching our problems in life, approaching the difficulties in life, in the very act of embracing them and cheerfully, we have almost solved the problem right away in that very act of cheerfully facing things, because we draw grace to ourselves when we approach life's difficulties with Krishna by our side. Victory is assured. And so this, you could sort of say, within the very problem of whatever life we're facing resides the solution. And the solution is right attitude and the right spirit. And when you have that, you could sort of say the problem itself is just an outward manifestation of that, and it goes away. Now, this is high-minded words, I know, because practically when it comes down to it, it's not so easy. But I think this is the spiritual path, is to find that solution, bring the divine joy that we can sum it up. And that's why we meditate, why we practice Kriya, and why we do all of these things in order to be able to apply it in this, in a practical manner, into solutions that bring us closer and closer to what our goal is. And so I'm going to leave that at that point and come back. As I say, next week we'll speak about Shraddha and Virya. But I want to go answer a couple of questions that were from last week. There were a couple of questions I'm not going to answer because they were, as I said, give me questions that are on topic, and because there are a couple that are off topic. And one of them is, I have a good question, very pithy, to the point. Why does pain leave us with memories of pain? Or maybe a good way to say that is, why does sorrow leave us with memories of pain? Or why do we hold on to those memories of pain? And it's true, I think, that if you just hold on to those memories too tightly, it's not a healthy thing. You have to be able to solve them to some degree and let them go. Master told a story about a fellow who came to him, and or maybe it was Swamiji, I don't remember, but and this woman was complaining about this difficult pain and what that she had, and this went through this experience. It was terrible, 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 and the question, whether it was Master Swami, asked, well, when did this happen? It's just, 20 years ago. Yeah, and it was 20 years had passed, and she was still suffering from it, recalling it. Obviously, if that's what's being referred to in this question, it's not healthy. It's not healthy, but the fact that we remember the lesson, pain is something that teaches us, don't do that. Put your hand on the stove, burns you. And it's the pain that reminds us. And so we have to be able to remember something. If we forget, if you lose your memory, if you suffer from, let's say, dementia and old age, you can't remember things. Names typically being one of the first to go. But if you don't remember anything, after a while you don't remember the lesson that was there. And you have to repeat again and again and again. And this is why spirituality and you could say self-realization, sometimes the word smriti is used. It's divine memory. We remember who and what we really are. But on the way to that, we remember the lessons learned so that we don't do that again. That's how you learn to be wise, you could say, doing all those things that were not wise. And then you hold on to them, internalize them with that self-honesty, that introspection. No, I'm not going to do that. And then we make the right choice next time. So I think memory can be an obstacle if it's misused in the wrong way, just remembering negative things in this world over and over again. But memory is good if we learn if it reminds us to do the right thing and learn the right lesson. And pain is like that to some degree, but it's a step on the way. We have to transcend that and learn the lesson. And the second question is here, we seek the relationships of like-minded souls. In the age of energy, Dwapara Yuga, how can we use those relationships to help channel the energy to create tools to benefit society, NGOs, mental health skills, empower others, and to aspire to reach others to reach their true potential? Well, I think to summarize there, I mentioned last week that as we evolve spiritually, magnetism begins to grow in the heart. And there's others too are doing the similarly, and we're naturally attracted through that magnetism, which is a form of love. We're magnetically attracted to seek out the company of like-minded souls. And this question is, how can we use that to do good things, to do good things? And I think one, keep increasing our magnetism and to be on the lookout for like-minded souls. So we'll begin to track that, but we can improve that if we realize this is what's happening, and to be out on the lookout for like-minded souls and to try to associate with them because many people are just simply neutral, and certainly those that are not like-minded, we have to deal with them. I'm not saying shun them, but particularly you could be neutral there. But when you magnetically feel that there's a positive feeling of other people, oh, I recognize this person from somewhere, or it's, these sort of a feeling that way that comes to us, that's a sign that there's probably some association from the past life, and there's some karmic connection. And it's good to try to purify those karmic connections. Now, there's karmic connections for negative reasons that are going to demand that we try to purify those as well. But we look for the positives and the positive others. And because you gain power that way, a group of people working together to manifest high ideals in society, in their own lives. And not that in the end, yes, a person might argue it's all duality, but yet we have to do something in life. And as long as we have to act, why not act in a good way? Do something good that uplifts other people, and in the process, we're going to be uplifted ourselves. And so if you have that recognition, join together with other people and be on the lookout and try to do something positive, working together with people. And it's a good lesson for us because it's difficult to bring people together, to a focus, to be able to do something. People who have perhaps a natural leadership ability, they've learned this. And Swami Kriyananda was marvelous in this way because he had an ability, and he had the magnetism to draw people, but he just didn't draw them to himself, you see. So if we're going to seek out like-minded souls and cultivate that, it's not drawing to us personally, it's drawing to us so that we together can serve something better, something higher, that we can be of service to something. And this is useful to us in our spiritual life because it helps to purify us. It helps to cultivate the heart's natural love. And we're going to go into that subject next week when we come back for class number 4. God bless all of you, and I hope to see you once again next week. Joy to you.